Hello, Dan Humberg here. I represent HarvestFires.com. This is an instructional video that will help you with how to assemble the tin kit for a Firestop system for a combine harvester. In this case, the harvester that we'd be working with would be an CaseIH 8240 or 8250. They have the same exhaust system on them. And what we're going to do in this video is to assemble the tin pieces on the bench so that you can see how they fit together, and it gives you a chance to thread screws in where you need to so that it'll go together more easily when you get it on the combine. But it'll help you a lot with understanding how the parts fit. Then we have the challenge of how to do that on the combine when there's all the junk on the combine to fit around. But this will help you in understanding that, and it'll also identify if we have any of the bends made incorrectly. Before I begin any of the actual video, I need to give the same cautionary statement that I always give on these, and that is that the Firestop system is designed to stop the chronic ignition of volatile dusts on a combine around the exhaust components. And it does a good job of that, but I cannot guarantee that you will never have a smolder or a fire on your combine. There are too many other things that can start a fire to guarantee anything. You can have a hot bearing, you can have an alternator that throws sparks, you can have an electrical short, you can have a friction point. There's just many things that can start a fire. However, the Firestop system is good at stopping the chronic ignition of dust at the exhaust system, at the turbocharger and the exhaust manifold and the hot parts of the exhaust pipes. So we still need you to be vigilant on the machine, but I hope that you'll find that your harvest is much less stressful once you have this kit installed. Okay, I want to go talk a bit about tools here before we get started. The kit is made of 24 gauge galvanized steel, and it goes together with square drive, number 2 square drive, pan head, self-drilling, self-tapping sheet metal screws. And they are really good for this. They work very well for it. The parts already have pilot holes cut for the screws. The laser cut those, and it's a computer designed set of tin. So the part, if you fold it correctly, the holes will line up, and the screws don't go in hard. But you do need to put the screws in ahead of time, especially on holes that are going to be hard for you to reach when you're doing the assembly. There are some that you can't. You have to reach underneath and behind and do blind, essentially. Find the hole by feeling it and starting the screw in. And so you need to pre-thread those holes in the sheet metal, or you'll find it very frustrating to try to do that on the combine. So I encourage you to put a screw in and out. You don't have to leave it in, but to run one in and out of each hole. And once you have this assembled on the bench, you'll see where the problem spots might be. Okay, I have my little driver here, a little cordless driver. A small one really helps. Let me turn you so you're looking down. I have about a 6-inch bit in this one, but I also have a little short bit here that I will use frequently, and I will provide you with those two. I'll also provide you with a little tiny stubby driver that I don't have on hand here that will fit in the palm of your hand, that has a bit sticking out of it, so you can do that by hand. And I also will provide you with a driver bit that's about 10 or 11 inches long to reach back in some places where it's hard to do otherwise. So that's how we're going to put it together. So let's start. I'm actually going to start with part number 2. Part number 1 is the very top of the box around your exhaust manifold and turbocharger, and that actually goes on very late in the installation. So we're going to start with parts 2 and 3. Here's the part number 2. This is part number 3. This will overlap like this. Screw holes line up. I'll set my driver down to the clutch on mine down to about 4 for this, because I do not want to strip out these holes. And I'm not going to put all the screws in mine because I want to get this done for you quickly. This flange overlaps the bottom of that piece. And then I forgot there's a little flange around the end here. So that should overlap like that instead. I'll shoot that screw in. Okay, that's enough for that one. The top piece will cover this up and tie these together as well. We have this keyhole that we bend out. The radiator blast will come over there and it will create a little vacuum here and suck some of the air out of the inside of the box to keep air moving along the left-hand end of your exhaust manifold. I have another part here that I'll show, but I won't necessarily put on here. It's part number 16. There are 3 screw holes here in the bottom, and these will line up. I guess I can put one in there to illustrate it. There's a slot in this, and there's a place on your block where you can, there's a casting boss there, and there's a little bracket held onto that supports a coolant line or something like that. And you can loosen that up and slip this piece underneath there when you do the assembly, and then put these screws in to assemble it onto this at that point when you're on the combine. So parts 2, 3, and 16 together. Part number 4, C82-4, is simply an extension of this. I could have done it with one piece, but it's impossible to get that big a chunk in there at once. So we do it in steps. Another keyhole that we can open up a little bit. Part number 4. Number 5 is going to cover part of your exhaust turbine. Part number 6, the lower half of the exhaust turbine. Notice that I put those 2 screws through from the back side, the inside of the kit. And I'm not certain about that, but I think that may be the only way that you can get those screws in. The compressor turbine will be right here, and it tends to be in the way. And so I hope that you can get those screws in on the kit. If you can't, there'll be other screws that will hold this together, but it's desirable to try to get those in. If you can get one in from this side, then you overlap this piece from this side and shoot it through back here, but I'm not sure you can reach that with a driver to do it. Piece number 6. Piece number 7 fills in here. Piece number 7. Piece number 8. Okay, that's piece number 8. I did not put screws through this yet because there's going to be another piece that overlaps that. For what it's worth, that piece is probably the hardest piece to install in the kit. It's just very difficult. You have to go up underneath behind the exhaust turbine and to get it in there. And it will go, but it's a puzzle. You have to rattle it around or figure out a way to snake it in there. I've done it, so I know it fits in there, but it's just a challenge. And then this screw would be reached with a long driver bit right over the turbo bearing to get that one in there. And these 2 underneath here, you have to reach underneath. That's where you want to pre-thread those holes, and that's where that little stubby screwdriver comes in. So piece number 8. Piece number 9. I want piece 9 to slip inside this flange here, and this one overlaps a little too much. I'm going to cut just a little of that one off with the tin snips. Okay, that's enough screws in that one for now. That's piece number 9. Piece number 10. This is one where I'm going to put a screw through from the inside of the kit to the outside right here. That would require a long driver bit when you get on the machine, but I can do it with this one here. Piece number 10 in place. 11. Those screws have to go from the bottom up. Piece number 12, I'm going to insert this now. I've got a hole here where there's a flange overlapping underneath that doesn't have a hole cut in it for it, but I can shoot the screw through there while I'm doing this on the bench and pre-thread that in, because it will drill its way through. Maybe. There, we did it. So that was part 12. Part 13. Will slide behind part number 12 and over the top of part 11. Part 13. This is 14. This flange with the 2 holes goes up against this. It looks to me like only one hole will line up. The bottom one, the lower one. So for the time being, that one's held on with a single screw, but it's in place. Piece number 14, looks like that was 15. I did 14 first. Okay, there's piece number 14, 15 are in place. All right, we have 14 and 15 put in place. I'm going to jump from 15 to part number 18. Also going to point out that I have I bent a 90-degree bend on this flange, and that's not quite right. It should bend back out to match this one inside here. Okay. 18. It's going to fit down inside here like this. Alright, that was part 18. This is part 19. Alright, that was part 19. Now we can put the lid, the whole top piece on here. Part number 1. Alright, I just put a smattering of screws in around there, but that's the top on the enclosure. That'll bring us to piece number 17. So now we're up to part number 20. Part number 21. I'm going to skip to part number 23. Now, this part, you may not need it. Well, you will need it in one way or another. Some of the 8240s from about the model 15 year, maybe when they first started them, there's a manifold pressure sensor line that comes out of the exhaust manifold right here. And if you have that year, you're going to have a line that comes out of here, and so you have to spit this over that line when you do the install. If your combine is a year or two or anything more recent than that, they move that line. It's not there anymore, and so this cut isn't really necessary, but it allows me to have a single part for that. In that case, you'd put this piece over the top of that. If you do have the sensor line here, you could cut the end off of this, bring the sensor line through, and then screw this piece on to cover up this cut. Otherwise, you can cover it with tape too when you do the install. Okay, I think we're pretty much assembled. I have piece number 22 here, and I'll show you how it's used. There is a pair of sensor lines that come out here, one or more sensor lines that come out here that monitor some part of the exhaust system. But they could vary in terms of where they come out of this hole, and so rather than try to cut a hole in exactly the right spot to fit tightly around them, you have this piece, and you can open these pedals up with the pliers so that they're parallel to that line and won't abrade it, cut it, whatever, but they fit around it. You can split it open here and fit it around that line with those pedals bent open, and then slip it up against here, rotate it around wherever it needs to be in order to cover up most of this hole, and just shoot screws through to hold it on. But it can isolate that sensor line and keep it in where it needs to be without allowing it to vibrate and move a lot. Just make sure you don't have a sharp edge up against it so that it's going to cut that line. So that's what that piece is for. Okay, I've only got maybe one screw out of 3 in this, but this shows the overall assembly of the tin kit. And that's what it's going to look like. I'd also recommend that you look at the CAD model. That will show the same thing, but on the computer design stage of it, and I rotate that around and talk about the kit so you get familiar with it in that case. Some things we might want to talk about here while we can was that sensor line I talked about. There's an actuator for part of your exhaust control system that comes up through here. You want to make sure that has clearance and it's free to move through its range of motion when you put these pieces on before you put the top lid on, or that biggest piece, part number 1. These pieces down here, there's a slot cut there to fit around a support piece for the exhaust. It supports the exhaust pipe out at this end. There's a cast iron corner on there, and there's a support for it that's sheet metal. It's heavy sheet metal. Should go through here, but if it doesn't and you have to move that slot a little bit, you can trim this to fit. These flanges are meant to be able to adjust to fit up against that, to minimize the size of the hole that we end up leaving here. So you can adjust them on the combine to fit up against that bracket that will go up from the bottom through here. This is where the return line for your turbo oil will go down. We'll leave the kit. This is the bottom of the kit. The exhaust turbine's right up here. Your turbo bearing is up here. You may wish to bend these pedals on this out just 1/8 of an inch of them, or just the last little bit with the pliers. Bend them out again so they are parallel to that line so that they don't rub against it and cut through it. You can do the same thing with this inside part if it comes too close. But you'd like to have some clearance around that line so that it doesn't, you're really not touching it with this tin if possible. And once you've got it assembled there, you can come back with some of that tape, tighten up this hole a little bit, and keep that pipe isolated in the center of that hole with that tape. Similarly, the pressure line for the turbo bearing will go up through here and go to the top of the turbo bearing. There's pedals cut here so that you can open them up. You can bend these and adjust them as ever you need in order to fit around that. Again, you want clearance for that. It's about the size of my finger going up through there. You want to have clearance around it. Make sure that you're not rubbing against it with this tin because the edge was cut by a laser. It's hard. It's not real sharp, but it's rough and it's hard. So you don't want that rubbing against that line. It'll cut through it. You'll lose your engine oil, and then bad things happen. So make sure that you have clearance for that tube going through there, and then use some, if you can reach under there with some pieces of that tape, goob that around here so that it kind of isolates that line in the center of that hole and doesn't let too much air escape around that hole, that tube, all right? That's your oil line for the turbo bearing. This corner here, this big hole, is for the pneumatic actuator that controls your turbocharger geometry. It's got a piston in it that uses air pressure to adjust your turbo boost, essentially. And it will come out of here at an angle. And you could have to cut more of this to fit around that. You can test fit this piece. These parts should fit around it on this side. This little patch piece is there so that you can fit this piece in and then put that patch on after that so it fits around the bottom of that piston arrangement. If you have to, you cut more around here to fit around that part, but you'd like to minimize the gap around that. And again, you can use tape around there to tighten it up a little bit so that you don't lose too much air around that spot. We'll talk about that again in the install video, but I want to mention it here. And then on this kit, I moved this hole, entry hole, from here back to here because it's right over the turbine now, and it's a little easier to work with out here. So that's where your air is going to enter. You're going to have a HVAC stub entry piece that'll go in here and screw on, and then on this one you'll have a rubber elbow that'll come up off that and go forward over the valve cover. There's another sensor line that comes up out of the exhaust system here, and again I've cut pedals here so that you can bend those up with a needle nose pliers. Make sure you've got clearance around that line and it fits in the middle of here somewhere, and you're not rubbing against it so that the vibration is going to cut that line. As at best it would cut through it and short out, stop the sensor from working, but at worst it stops that sensor from working and makes a spark source here. So make sure you have clearance around there, and then you can use that foil tape to make sure you isolate that line or hold it in the middle of the hole with that so that it can't go anywhere, can't vibrate over to one edge or something like that. So that'll come out of there. These pieces up here, right up here, you're going to have your diesel exhaust catalyst. It's a big can that fits up here. These are meant to bend to fit against that. So you kind of like them spring-loaded against the side of it. Same on the back side here, spring-load against the side of it. And then these fingers can bend away. You can bend them out as much as you need to so that they clear that can, but maybe come up against it. You'll have to probably bend them out because I've left them long so that we know that we can reach up to that can. But you may have to bend them out so that they come up against that can, but give you enough clearance to get this piece in place. Same thing on the outer end of it here. And if you have to cut, there's a corner here where you're probably going to have to cut with a tin snips in order to be able to bend this one out. Because right now it's got a flange in it. You can't bend it out with that flange there. So you may have to cut there in order to bend these fingers out. Okay? Well, that's the tin kit for an 8240, 8250 assembled on the bench. Again, I've only put in maybe one screw out of every three. You want to put screws in at least all of the holes that might be hard to reach. The inside ones, the end ones, the underneath ones. Want to get screws in those so that they're pre-threaded. These on the top will be easy to reach. These on this back side around here will be easy to reach. But the ones on the bottom, the ones on the ends, the ones on the inside, definitely the ones on the bottom, you want to have pre-threaded those holes so that the screws go in easily when you are assembling that on the combine.
Hi, this is Dan Humberg again. As I was editing the last part of this video, I realized there's something I wanted to tell you that I didn't remember to do when we were at the bench. If you're actually following this and assembling the tin on the bench, once you have the whole thing put together, I would encourage you strongly to take a couple Sharpie markers. Personally, I use different color ones to make things easy to see and read. But I would mark any notes you want to on the outside of that. If you draw lines across joints where parts meet, you can see where they match up to help align things when you get on the combine. That also helps you to know which piece goes over the top of which other one, so that you can put it back together on the machine the same way that you do on the bench. You can make notes to yourself about this screw goes in from the inside out to the outside in. You can circle ones that you want to do differently, or anyway, you can do yourself some favors anyway by marking that thing up while it's still on the bench, because then you're going to end up taking it mostly apart in order to put it back on the system on the machine itself. And of course, once it's all apart, then you can't make those notes anymore. So I would encourage you to mark it up as however it would be helpful to you when you're getting before you get on the combine to actually put it on. So that's just a suggestion, but it helps me when I do something like that. Good luck with your installation.
So I hope you have a safe harvest. Watch the rest of the videos to know how to put it on the combine itself. Watch that CAD video to know if you have a hard time visualizing it on the bench here. Okay, good luck with your installation.